My name is David. I'm 46 years old. I live just outside Flagstaff, Arizona. Dry heat, pale skies, a rusted basketball hoop in the driveway that hasn't seen a net in years. 7 years ago, I married Laura. She had a son, Evan. 11 at the time. Quiet, almost polite. Didn't say much unless it was to correct you. His father was already gone before I ever stepped into their lives. Disappeared one winter, a few months after Evan's 3rd birthday. No custody battle, no tearful goodbyes, just vanished. Like some ghost that slipped out through the cracks in the drywall. Every now and then Evan would ask about him, but not often. Not with real hunger. Just enough to keep the wound from closing. I filled in what I could. Bought him his first real bike. Not the plastic kind, the one with brakes that worked. Sat in the front row at every school play even when he didn't have lines. Built him a ramp for his skateboard. Drove him to friends' houses. Sat in the bleachers while he missed every shot. I paid the camp fees. I replaced the cracked phone screens. I taught him how to change his oil and when to keep his mouth shut. I never asked for much in return. Just acknowledgement. Not even love. Just to be seen. But there's a certain kind of boy who's raised inside a story where the villain is whoever marries his mother. And he carries that story like armor. Not loud, not dramatic, but steady. Silent. Evan didn't scream at me, didn't fight me. He outgrew me methodically. And one afternoon, I heard it out loud. I was under his car in the garage. Sweat clung to my ribs. Rust flakes fell in my eyes every time I tightened a bolt. I was changing his brake pads. Pads I bought, tools I owned, time I carved out of a Saturday I needed for rest. He had an old sedan, a 2008 Honda Civic that wheezed on hills and still smelled like middle school. He'd asked if I could take a look because the brakes were grinding. I didn't even hesitate. I just said, "Leave it in the garage." The sun was just starting to lean westward, leaking heat through the concrete like a grudge. I was halfway through when I heard the door open. Evan walked in. Didn't take out his earbuds. Didn't stop at the threshold. Just walked right past me. The way you'd walk past someone fixing a curb or sweeping a floor. But then, just before he disappeared into the kitchen, he said something over his shoulder. "You're not even on our family tree." And that was it. No bitterness. No hesitation. Not even a second glance. Just a sentence tossed like trash over the shoulder and then gone. He didn't say it to start a fight. He didn't care enough to make it personal. It wasn't rebellion. It was indifference. I lay there under his car, socket wrench in hand, heart frozen somewhere between my chest and my throat. The tools were quiet. The garage held its breath. And I heard the faucet in the kitchen turn on. Like nothing had happened. I stayed there for a long time. Not to finish the job that was already done. I stayed because if I stood up too fast, I would break something. I thought about a lot of things. The birthday parties I paid for. The Christmas mornings I filmed while Laura smiled and Evan unwrapped gifts he thought came from Santa. The school accounts, the dentist bills, the quiet sacrifices no one ever noticed because I never once asked them to. I thought about the time Evan came home crying because he hadn't made the varsity team, and I was the one who sat with him on the porch until midnight. I didn't give him a speech. I didn't tell him to toughen up. I just sat there, breathing with him. I thought maybe that counted for something. Apparently it didn't. He had said it casually, "Not on our family tree." Like a clerk correcting a misspelled name. I wasn't even a branch. I wasn't even a footnote. I went back inside. Washed the grease off my hands. Laura was in the living room, half asleep. A cooking show humming on the TV. Evan had gone upstairs. I didn't tell her what he said. Didn't accuse. Didn't whine. That's not what men like me do. We absorb it. We compartmentalize. We put it next to the other things we're not allowed to feel. That night, after dinner, while the house was quiet, I opened my laptop. Logged into the phone account. Removed Evan from the family plan. No notice. No warning. I just clicked remove and saved the changes. Then I opened the school portal, took myself off the emergency contact list, cleared my number from the pickup forms, from the medication log, from the digital fingerprint I'd left over the years. Location tracking? Gone. I erased myself from the scaffolding of his life the way you'd clear out junk from a garage. One form at a time. 5 minutes. 7 years of quiet, invisible fatherhood. Gone in 5 minutes. And no one noticed. The next day, Laura didn't say anything. Evan didn't mention the car. He probably assumed I hadn't touched it. Probably didn't care. I waited. I thought maybe he'd notice the change. A failed text. A notification that didn't come through. Maybe he'd ask. But he didn't. 2 days later, Laura walked into the kitchen and said, "Hey, is something wrong with the phone plan? Evan says his calls keep dropping at school." I was rinsing a plate. I kept my eyes on the sink. I said, "You told me this was your family. I just took myself out of the equation." She didn't answer right away. I saw it, the way her shoulders stiffened. The pause before speaking. Like someone realizing a building creaked in a way it never had before. She wanted to push back. I could feel it. But she didn't. Instead, she went quiet. Like someone who's just remembered where the fault line is. That evening, Evan came home late. Didn't say much. Complained that his phone wasn't working right. No signal in the cafeteria. No bars in the gym. I sat on the couch and listened. He never asked me directly. He asked Laura. Loud enough for me to hear, but not loud enough to involve me. She gave him a look. One I couldn't decipher. Maybe guilt. Maybe frustration. But she didn't hand him the answer. A week later, his school called twice during class hours. No answer. No pickup. I wasn't on the list anymore. Laura didn't have service. Evan had gotten into a fight. No one showed up. He walked home. Quiet. Blood on his shirt. Bruise under one eye. Said nothing. I watched him from the hallway. He dropped his backpack. Went into his room. Closed the door. Not a word. And for the first time in 7 years, I didn't feel like I was letting him down. I felt like I was watching someone learn gravity. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was deserved. Laura made dinner. I didn't ask her how he was. She didn't ask me what I was thinking. The house felt colder. Less like a home. More like a waiting room. And still, no one mentioned the garage. No one mentioned what Evan had said. That's what silence does. Turns betrayal into background noise. Could have shouted. I could have stormed into his room, demanded respect, reminded him of what I'd done, what I'd given, what I had sacrificed to stand in the place his real father abandoned. But why? He had told me where I stood. I was a missing branch, a gap on the tree, a name that never made it to the bark. So I acted accordingly, and no one stopped me. The day Evan came home with a split lip, Laura saw something she'd never seen before. Not in him. In me. I didn't ask what happened. Didn't rise from the table. I just watched him step over the threshold with his shoulders slouched, his shirt torn, his cheek already turning the color of dried blood. He avoided my eyes like a dog that knows the door is locked and still scratches anyway. He didn't head to the kitchen. He didn't ask for ice. He walked upstairs, one slow step at a time, and shut the door behind him without a word. That's when Laura turned to me. Not with anger. Not with panic. With something closer to realization. Her lips parted like she might ask a question, but what came out instead was quieter. "You're not on the contact list anymore, are you?" I said nothing. She looked down at the counter, then back at me. "And the phone plan? You really did take him off?" I wiped a crumb from my plate. "You said this was your family. I just took myself out of the equation." She stood there for a moment. You could almost hear it. The clock ticking behind her, the fridge humming. Every noise in the house suddenly louder than the woman who used to raise her voice about leftovers, laundry, loose socks. Now, not a word. Because she knew. She had known for a long time. Known how often I'd driven, paid, fixed, covered. Known it was my signature that kept the water on. My hours that kept the car running. My name in the fine print of everything they leaned on. And she let that knowledge float just beneath the surface because it was easier not to look directly at it. But now the cracks had spread, and she couldn't stop them. That night, she cooked dinner like she always did: chicken, rice, oversteamed broccoli. Evan didn't come down. She didn't ask him to. She plated his food, left it on the counter, and sat across from me like nothing had changed. But it had. The silence between us wasn't routine anymore. It was loaded, complicit, like two strangers caught in a lie that neither wanted to admit they started. The next morning I made coffee. She came down late. No makeup, no earrings. Her robe hung loose like it didn't know whose body it was dressing. She sat down with a small sigh and said, "I think Evan needs to start managing some of his own things." It wasn't a plan. It was a confession. I nodded. She opened her laptop and began typing. Class schedules, appointment times, login credentials. I asked him to write down his own weekly planner. He looked at me like I was speaking Chinese. She said, "Why? No one's driving me anyway." Then he just walked off. There was no blame in her voice. Not yet. Just a slow dawning that something she'd relied on, someone, had quietly vanished from the scaffolding of their lives. That was me. I had stopped reminding them that I existed. And now, without the reminders, they were starting to forget what kept the wheels turning. That week she tried. She really did. She started making her own lists, printing out schedules, checking the calendar like a novice. But every move she made was late. The trash wasn't taken out. Evan missed a dentist appointment. His lunch card stopped working. No one had refilled it. She looked at me when it happened, like I had forgotten something. But I hadn't. I had just stopped doing it. Stopped carrying the weight no one acknowledged. The house changed. The music disappeared. No more bass thudding from behind Evan's door. No more slammed cabinets. No more shouted jokes from the Xbox headset. Just silence. And the sounds that replaced it weren't better. They were reminders. Forks clinking. Drawers opening. Spoons stirring mugs that no one finished drinking. The door opening and closing. No, I'm home. No, be back later. One night I found Laura sitting on the bottom step of the stairs, holding a box of receipts, school fees, medical payments, birthday gifts, all of them signed by me. She wasn't crying. She wasn't even breathing heavily. Just staring, like she'd found someone's diary and wasn't sure if she had the right to read it. I walked past her without a word, sat on the porch, lit a cigarette I hadn't touched in years. The flame shook in the wind. The smoke felt like something earned. She came out eventually, didn't sit beside me, stood behind the screen door and said, "You did more than I let you take credit for." I nodded. She said, "Why didn't you ever say anything?" I flicked the ash off and stared out at the dark. Because I didn't think I needed to. I thought showing up was enough. She didn't reply. Maybe she wanted to. Maybe she thought if she did, I'd tell her what she needed to hear. That it wasn't her fault. That Evan was just a boy. That I still had more to give. But I had nothing left. Later that week, Evan asked Laura why he couldn't check his grades online. His portal password had expired. She didn't know how to reset it. That had always been me. He didn't ask me. He just said, "I guess I'm screwed." Then left the room. A few days later, his car wouldn't start. I watched him from the window trying to jiggle the key, punching the wheel. He didn't knock, didn't text. Eventually, he called Laura. She came out, looked under the hood like it was a puzzle from another planet. He didn't come back inside for hours. When he did, he avoided my gaze again. Said nothing. That silence? That was the sound of a boy learning what absence feels like. Not anger. Not punishment. Absence. Because anger still means you're important enough to fight with. But absence? Absence is emptiness. Absence is what happens when a man stops begging to be seen. And I had. Laura started waking up earlier. Making breakfast. Not for me. For him. Toast. Orange juice. She was trying to build the routine I used to maintain without anyone noticing. I'd hear her in the kitchen, pan clattering, timer beeping. Evan would grunt a thank you, sometimes. But he was always late. Always forgot something. Once she asked if I'd drive him. Said, "Just this one time. He's got a test. It matters." I looked up from my coffee. She was standing by the fridge, arms crossed, her expression thin. I said, "You told me he was your son. You're right." She didn't ask again. Evan missed that test. The school called. Laura's number again out of range. No one else on the emergency list. Another mischance. Another consequence. Still, he didn't say a word to me. Still, she didn't challenge it. But the cracks kept spreading. One night, I found Evan staring at his phone on the porch. It was late. Maybe midnight. He didn't see me behind the window. He was scrolling through his contacts. Stopped. Scrolled again. Stopped. Then he dialed. Held the phone to his ear. Waited. Hung up. He looked like he wanted to throw it. But didn't. Just slumped deeper into the chair. Shoulders hunched. Eyes hollow. I don't know who he was trying to call. But I know it wasn't me. Because I wasn't in his phone anymore. And I wasn't about to put myself back in. I closed the curtain and went to bed. Let them live in the silence they built. Let them see what happens when the man in the background finally stops moving. Because sometimes the only way people notice you were holding everything up is when you finally let go. The phone rang while I was at the shop. The kind of ring that cuts through machinery and does like it doesn't belong there. I almost ignored it. Unknown number. Flagstaff area code. But that doesn't mean anything anymore. Everyone's a stranger until they need something. I wiped my hands on a rag and answered. Hello. Silence. Long enough to make me think the call had dropped. Then a voice I hadn't heard ask me for anything in years. Hey. Just that. No name. No armor. No edge. I closed my eyes. David, he said, quieter now. It's Evan. I didn't respond. I didn't hang up either. I just stood there, phone pressed to my ear, listening to his breathing on the other end. Uneven, like he'd been walking fast, or crying, or both. I couldn't remember your number, he said. I tried. I really did. It finally came back today. That landed harder than any apology could have. I got into trouble again, he added. Nothing crazy, just stuff. And no one showed up. I waited. I thought maybe. His voice cracked and he stopped. I leaned against the workbench. You always showed up, he said finally. And now no one does. Just, can you? There it was. Not Dad. Not I'm sorry. Not I was wrong. Just can you? I didn't say yes. I didn't say no. I grabbed my keys. I drove to where he was waiting. Sitting on a low concrete wall outside the school. Backpack between his feet like it didn't know where it belonged anymore. His lip was healed. His eyes weren't. He looked older. Smaller. Like someone who'd learned the world doesn't bend just because you expected it to. I didn't hug him. He didn't reach for me. We sat in silence for a minute. Then I said, get in. I took him home. Not because I was his father, but because I was the man he finally saw. That night, after everyone went to bed, I opened the drawer in my office, pulled out an envelope I'd printed months ago. Not in anger, in clarity. Inside was a list. Not numbers, not totals. Just everything I'd covered over 7 years. Camps, tutors, shoes, groceries, repairs, birthdays, late fees, early mornings, presents itemized. On the back I wrote one line. You never called me Dad, but you called me when no one else did. I sealed it. The paper felt heavier than it should have. And I knew then, this wasn't reconciliation. It was closure in progress. The morning after I picked Evan up from school, I made breakfast. Same as always, eggs, toast, bacon. I even cut the crusts off the toast the way he liked when he was 12. The same way I had done for years without ever being asked. I didn't call him down. I didn't tap on his door. I just made the meal, plated it, set it at the table, and sat down. He came. Quiet, like he thought speaking too loud might shatter whatever was left. Laura followed a few minutes later, her hair still damp from the shower, eyes wary like a woman waiting to be blamed. We ate in silence. Forks against plates. Sips of coffee. The soft creak of wood as chairs shifted under weight we no longer spoke about. When we were done, I stood. Not with drama. Not with finality. Just stood. And I looked at them both. The boy I raised without a title and the woman who let me vanish one day at a time. And I said 4 words. I'm leaving for a while. I didn't explain. I didn't answer the question they didn't dare ask. I walked to the fridge, placed 2 envelopes under a magnet, one labeled Laura, the other Evan, and left the kitchen. No one followed me. The front door closed behind me like a sigh. Not a slam, not a goodbye, just air leaving a room that had forgotten how to breathe with me in it. I didn't pack much. A duffel, my tools, the spare keys to the old cabin 2 hours north, the one I fixed up myself back when I still believed effort was its own reward. I didn't leave a note. The envelopes were enough. Inside each was a copy of the list. No totals, no dollar signs, just dates, items, moments, the scaffolding, every bolt, every brick, every unseen thing I did to keep their lives from falling apart while they pretended I was part of the wallpaper. I didn't leave it to guilt them. I left it so they wouldn't lie to themselves later. I wanted them to remember the truth when their memory started softening me into myth. Because that's what happens, doesn't it? Men like me, the ones who do the heavy lifting, we disappear without sound, and years later they say, "He was a good man." Like that absolves them of never saying it when it mattered. So I made sure the record stayed sharp. Undeniable. Not love. Not accusation. Just evidence. The road north was empty. The desert quiet. I drove with the windows down, letting the wind strip the house from my skin. Every mile away was a mile back into myself. At the cabin, I didn't unpack. Just set the bag down, sat on the porch, and listened to the pine trees shift like old men changing position in their sleep. That night, the silence wasn't empty. It was earned. I slept for 10 hours without waking. When I opened my eyes, I didn't reach for my phone. There were no notifications, no missed calls, just stillness. Day 2, Laura texted, "Where are you?" I didn't respond. Day 3, another one. "Are you coming back soon?" No punctuation. Just that flat kind of worry that doesn't quite commit to remorse. I turned off the phone. Let them sit in it. Let them feel what it means when the man you don't call dad stops being your safety net. At home, I imagined the small collapses, the Wi-Fi issues, the leaking faucet, the trash that didn't get taken out on Wednesday, the car battery she didn't know how to check, the groceries that didn't restock themselves. Little things, each with their own gravity. Because the truth is, I didn't raise Evan with lectures. I raised him with presence, with quiet repetition, with showing up when it didn't matter so that, when it did, he never had to ask. And that's the part that hurt the most. He thought love looked like applause. He didn't recognize the man in the background as the one holding the stage together. A week passed. No new messages. Then finally a knock at the cabin door. Evan. Not angry. Not desperate. Just tired. He looked smaller than I remembered. Paler. Like absence had aged him in fast forward. He didn't speak first. I opened the door, stepped aside. He walked in, sat at the table like he'd done 1,000 times before. Then, "I read the list." I nodded. "It's a lot." It was. He looked down, fidgeted, picked at a hangnail. "Why'd you leave it?" I thought for a long time before I answered. "Because I wanted you to know I wasn't background noise. I was the floor. You just got used to walking on me." He winced. Not from guilt. From recognition. "That's fair," he said. We sat in silence. Then, barely above a whisper, "I didn't know how much you did. You didn't want to know." He nodded. Another long pause. Then he said the one thing I hadn't expected. "I wish I had called you Dad." I looked at him. Really looked. He meant it. But I didn't soften. I didn't reach across the table. Because the truth is, the apology wasn't for me. It was for him. For his own conscience. For the part of himself that needed to believe he wasn't as cruel as his silence had been. "I wish you had too," I said. But I didn't say it would have been enough. Because it wouldn't have. Some words come too late to matter. He stayed an hour. Told me about school. About Laura. About how quiet the house was now. He didn't ask me to come back. He just said, "If you do, I'll be better." I nodded. But I didn't promise anything. After he left, I opened his envelope again. Ran my thumb down the list. Read the back. "You never called me Dad. But you called me when no one else did." That line wasn't about forgiveness. It was about truth. And the truth was this: my final contribution wasn't money, or time, or love. It was absence. The space where I used to be. Because sometimes, the only way a man can be heard is by vanishing. Sometimes, silence isn't punishment. It's the only language they understand.